Good evening, everyone. Gumba Malgan Gumba Dani Gianindu, which is good evening. It's good to see you in Mbarbarrum, which is the traditional language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. And my name's Vicky McDonald, and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO here at the State Library of Queensland. And on behalf of my colleagues, I welcome you this evening to our final Portrait of an Artist event for the year. I begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. We are inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's memory for future generations. I'd like to welcome tonight, our very special guest, Jennifer Hurd, who's sitting in the front row here. Welcome, Jennifer. I'd also like to welcome our facilitators of the conversation, Pat Hoffey AM, Professor Emeritus at the Queensland College of Art, Griffith University, and Michael Ether, Director and Co-founder of Fireworks Gallery. Thank you both for joining us this evening. I also welcome James C. Sourris AM and his sister Marika. Thank you for joining us. Helen Brodie, President of the Queensland Library Foundation, members of the Library Board of Queensland and the Queensland Library Foundation Council, and colleagues from across the Cultural Centre and particularly Quagoma. Thank you for joining us as well. And ladies and gentlemen, it's terrific to have you here face to face and to be able to host you here tonight at the State Library. And of course, it's also wonderful to end our Portrait of an Artist series for another year with such an esteemed guest. Jennifer Hurd is an award-winning Mbarbarrum artist who has made an enormous contribution to creative practice and art education in this country. Born in Brisbane with strong family ties to Far North Queensland, Jennifer studied fashion design at the Queensland College of Art, followed by a decade in fashion and theatre. And Jennifer helped to establish the Bachelor of Visual Arts in Contemporary Indigenous Art with the late Marshall Bell and Michael Ether at the Queensland College of Art. So Vernon Arkey, who's also here this evening with us, our first Portrait of an Artist guest for the year, was one of the many notable artists whose creative practice was influenced by this groundbreaking course. Jennifer, of course, went on to co-found the prolific artist collective ProppaNOW with Vernon Arkey and Richard Bell in 2004. And her work has gained international attention and praise, exhibiting in the US, Poland, New Zealand, and across Australia, including here, proudly, at State Library of Queensland. Jennifer's canvas Irvine Bank Massacre was displayed for our extraordinary spoken exhibition, which opened in 2019. And I just remind you too that you can view Spoken online, and we've got all the virtual reality there for the experience for you as well. In that exhibition, the imposing 3 metre by 3 metre triptych of acrylic, thread and buttons symbolised resistance and connection to the land. And we're certainly honoured to have Jennifer with us tonight to share her insights and personal journey. Tonight's facilitators are fellow distinguished artists, Pat Hoffey AM and Michael Ether. Pat is a Professor Emeritus at Queensland College of Art, Griffith University, and she's an internationally renowned artist and accomplished researcher, writer and curator, and was highly commended in this year's Archibald's Prize. Michael co-founded the Campfire Group, an Indigenous and non-Indigenous contemporary art collective, and he is the director of Fireworks Gallery, which he established in 1993 with the late Norrie Nielsen. I encourage everyone to participate in the conversation tonight by sending your questions via Slido. So it's a great little mechanism for sending questions. You've got the QR code there, so if you just put your camera on that. And the great thing about Slido is you can put your questions in and then others will vote for them and they go to the top of the pile for our facilitators to answer. So do put your questions into Slido. And of course, I'd really like to thank James Sourris for his enthusiastic support of this event series here at State Library and also to the broader cultural community. But for now, please join me in welcoming Jennifer, Pat and Michael to the stage. Thank you.
It's an incredibly interesting, can I call it a generation point for you? Because you had to do the research to find out what happened to your forebears, to your grandmother specifically.
My early years, especially as a child, there was a big disconnect between my Aboriginality, and one of the paintings or works that I did for UQ was about that story, about my grandmother's country, about my mother's country, about my great-grandmother's country, because they were all born in their country. But I wasn't. I was born in Brisbane.
The love for the visual, for design, for making never left you. It was always there, wasn't it?
I always loved fashion.
Yeah.
And I remember as a young girl I used to sew because I couldn't afford to buy.
And then that led on later to something pretty significant when you ended up following that through at the Queensland College of Art.
That's right. I went into fashion design. And I went into fashion design because I actually applied to get into fine arts, but there was no openings, and I thought, oh well, I like fashion. What are the options? And they said, oh well, there's fashion still open, and I said, I'll do that.
This idea of sanctioning off a subject, a whole course called the Bachelor of Visual Arts in Australian Indigenous Arts was for attracting only Indigenous people or First Nations people, to be taught only by First Nations people. Tell me why that was so important.
It was important to have people that had done something to show them that it could be done. And they didn't want to discuss things about identity or their origins with white people. I remember when I went looking for my mother, they wouldn't give me any information, and I wrote her name down and I said, you've got to help me. I can't find any information on her from anyone.
So that's an experience that only another Aboriginal person could have gone through. So it had to be Aboriginal people who were teaching there. Did you get time for your own art?
No.
You were just full-blown giving your attention to the education.
Oh, well, I had to.
And you are raising people that have become the bastions, if you like, of contemporary Indigenous artists in Australia. Give me some of those names of the artists that went through Bovakaya under your leadership.
Vernon Archie was one of them, and Tony Albert, he was like 17 years of age when he entered the course.
Dale Harding.
Ryan Presley,
Robert
Robert Andrew, and Carol McGregor.
A lot of the women.
Deborah Taylor.
We can just keep going.
Yeah.
So you've got these artists, this group of artists, including yourself, thinking we've got to do more in terms of spearheading what contemporary Indigenous Aboriginal art can be.
Yes.
Tell me about the beginning of ProppaNOW.
I'd played with the idea of putting together an Aboriginal artist group long before Kaya, and it was Vernon and Richard and myself, and we talked about the idea of what Aboriginal art should be. It should have integrity. So, Proppa came out of, doing things the proper way. And then now, right now.
Yeah. Your own art practice starts blossoming, and yet you never leave behind particular tendencies or loves, and that is of stitching and the buttons and the detail.
Everything I ever did was about Aboriginal history. And I call my work political too, but people look at it and think, oh, that's not political. I mean, look at those shields. The shields were the first defence.
Absolutely.
Line of defence against first contact.
So you're at your peak at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, when I think about in Brisbane, these two incredible shows that you're churning out. What's next?
Well, I don't know, just keep going, I guess. I can't see myself staying as a member of ProppaNOW for forever.
Because?
Because I'd like to just continue my own art practice and see if, something different comes out.
If you wanted to say one thing to the future generation of young Aboriginal artists coming up now, what advice would you give them?
Be passionate, be real, be honest, which is basically the same. I think I was once famous for saying, the currency of the future will be integrity. It won't be money, it'll be all about people being real. I'm not supposed to be in front of you.
What gave you that idea?
And I'm not leaving ProppaNOW. I like their company too much.
So, Pat, you interviewed Jennifer some months ago while she had a show on, and looking at it now, edited down version.
What are you doing, mate? God, behave.
What are you thinking now, just on reflection some months later, just watching that clip where we're at now with Jennifer and some of the important points of Jennifer's practice?
One of the things that's always impressed me about Jennifer's work, and more so as it develops, is how it differentiates itself from what is happening in broader Australian contemporary Indigenous art. And especially, I guess, what I loved seeing was when the shields and this tiny little pinpricks of those shields were blown up onto the windows of the UQ Art Gallery for the ProppaNOW exhibition. And you realised that those shields, which were at the same time both woundings, perforations, things that let things in and things that also let things out, and that they come from a very deep place in Jennifer's work and thinking on a number of levels, because she's always loved the making. From the get-go when she was a kid, it was the stuff that she was drawn to. And the ideas grew from the stuff, the materials, the fact that this matter that we deal with and our involvement with it as artists, touching, feeling, getting into it, is what fabricates ideas. So it's there in those shield works. There are a lot of shields being used in contemporary Aboriginal art subject matter, but there are no shields that are being done in the way that Jennifer does, these North Queensland shields that are weapons of attack as well as defence. Often they were used as weapons of attack as well as defence. And yet the way in which she has reconfigured these shields for now is this artist's skin of defence, and it's a lot like you, but correct me if I'm wrong, this is how I see it, that you've got that warrior woman, you've always had that don't mess with me warrior woman feeling about you. And yet there's that gentleness that allows things to come in and go back again. And for me, they're absolutely remarkable. I just couldn't think of a better thing to use on the front window of the UQ Art Museum, because I thought, here we are. Here are these artists in this mob, this ProppaNOW mob, who have had the common sense decency to say to us, non-Indigenous people, we've got some ideas we want to share with you. Listen, and we'll listen to you back. So it's that process of exchange that those shields make that I just find incredibly moving.
Mm.
Thank you.
Jennifer, looking now at some of those ideas and hearing yourself speak, how do you think about yourself now in your practice?
Oh, look, I just love what I do, but I'd like to do more of what I like.
Which is?
Well, just everything, trying new ideas and so forth. I can't see myself forever doing pinhole shield designs. My eyes are getting too bad for that. So, I don't know.
But the ideas are still a strong thread, the same ideas are a strong thread for you?
Yes, yeah, of course. I mean, I researched shield designs because they were from up in North, East and West Queensland, and I just wanted to learn more about my country, you know, and that's what started it all. And I started with reading all the Henry Reynolds novels and books, and I didn't always agree with what he had to say, but anyway, I made up my own mind and did my own travels up there, and I remembered I wanted to see the Irvine Bank Massacre place. And here I was on my own, travelling along the bloody highway along Irvine Bank with a video camera out the window at 100 miles an hour. And then I thought, no, stop. Just take the time to look around. And then I noticed, you know, like everything was shot up. The signs, the speed signs, the road signs, everything was shot to pieces.
What year was this, Jen?
Oh, quite some time before I did.
Like in the 90s? 80s?
Late 90s, early 200. Yeah. And I'd planned to take a journey with Karen Casey, who recently passed away. But we were going to put a line of shields designs up along the road to Irvine Bank and build a tree house or something and climb up and see how many people actually would attack these shields. But we never got to do it, so. But I did do the painting, so which the National Museum has now, the War Memorial Museum.
I might just, I know you've said this a while, and in case we hadn't, but this is this wonderful quote that Jennifer has in her artist statement, and you might have seen it or heard it, but I'll say it again because it's Christy Palmerston from North Queensland, 1840s, I think, 1838, said these shields may have had some purpose for their own wars, but we found that our bullets pierced them like paper. And that was the sort of, you know, genesis moment for...
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
For piercing paper. So the holes in the shield designs actually represent bullets. And I've started using real bullet casings now on things to mark places that...
well, you told everyone to get real.
Yes, I know. Well, I have to practice what I preach. So that's the idea behind it.
It's funny because your pinholes come from the back and they puncture to the front, which is the
Yes.
opposite. But the shadows are beautiful.
Yes.
Like it's a better aesthetic.
I did one design that failed in a way, but I kind of wanted to make this statement about Aboriginal history and how it made me feel. And I said to myself, how do I really feel? And I thought, I see red. So I did that piece.
Irvine Bank Massacre.
No, I see red.
Oh, you saw the piece called
And
it.
I actually wrote the words, I see red, and I painted red at the back. And I thought it had failed. And I looked at it more recently, and I actually saw the red. So it needed a little bit more work, and I intend to push that a little bit more. So there's lots of works that I kind of feel didn't quite work or didn't quite get there. Not for me anyway, didn't pass muster. So I'd just put them aside. But it's not, well, I never throw works out, never. I always put them aside, think about them, and then go back to them at a later time when I think I've learned something I need to know about the process. So I kind of think that was a special one, but didn't work.
Pat was talking in that lovely section of the interview about the fashion days and coming through the fashion door into the fine art world, and you've clearly carried a lot of some of those, viewpoints and perspectives into it. And can you talk about that, because I think it's really quite interesting, as you said, in the materiality of how you work and like your clear colour. It's without clichéing, in fashion, everything comes down to strong and simple things, and the sewing and the buttons and the simple design. Can you talk about that for audiences here?
Yeah, well, I started sewing quite young, and I always had a feel for fabric. I could feel it and know what it was, whether it was silk, cotton, whatever. But I actually started making my clothes when I was about 15, and I was working in the valley in a place called jeans and workwear and King G, and then I moved over the road to Kerry Craig for a little while. It didn't last long. I had the night watchman and people like that chasing me around when I did overtime, so I decided I didn't like that anymore. And I just relied on my own skills that I'd developed by that time. I had a foster mum who sewed as well, and so I was always interested in sewing and making my own things. I made all my children's clothes. I made their bed sheets. I made their curtains. I made my mother-in-law's everything. If it was a sewing job, I'd put my hand up. So, I really loved fashion. My time doing fashion at QCA was very special to me.
You got on so well with Bonnie English, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we loved Bonnie. Bonnie's passed away now, but I remember a couple of cheeky fashion students used to sit in the front row, and we used to eat Chico babies, and we used to draw around it and then put Bonnie's hairdo on it. She'd like that. I actually told her that one day, and she said, "You cheeky buggers." I thought you were listening to my lectures, and I said, "We were listening. We really were."
So you got your degree,
Yes.
and then what?
Well, there wasn't classed as a degree at that time. Then I moved on to early childhood teaching because I liked the idea of teaching, and I did that. And then I started at QCA. I used to go to all the forums that they had for the start of Kaya, and I was very interested in, this idea of this new course in contemporary Australian Indigenous art, and I didn't dream for a minute that the person that would be chosen would be me.
It's absolutely true, but I think that we suffer in Australia in terms of a fairly myopic view about what an artist does and what an artist's practice is. And if we think about art as a form of communication that goes much broader than making the object, then there's a different way of thinking of success and where your best successes might lie. Because the energy that you were pouring into making community that didn't exist in the visual arts in Brisbane then, it required every bit of inventiveness, as you said, perseverance, a lot of other skills that you bring to making your own artwork too. Now, when we look at history about, especially contemporary art, about artists, the way in which artists work in society and how their ideas circulate and how they infect and draw back and then turn it out again. I think that's absolutely worth considering, not as something that you did on the side and then, while the art object making took a ride. I mean, it's a huge career. It's a huge career for many, many decades, and it's had extraordinary results that go way beyond Brisbane. It wouldn't have happened without her. It goes across Australia and it goes from there internationally. You can't turn that tide without giving that kind of complete and utter focus and dedication, and it comes from passion, as she said in the last words. It's got to come from, you've got to love it.
Yeah. And I did, I was very passionate about teaching, and I found that out when I took on this course, and I couldn't have done it without the support of people like George Betlin and, Michael and was around at the time, and the times when it was being discussed at the gallery, Queensland Art Gallery. I was there, and I just was so interested in this course they were discussing that I thought...
It came out of the balance show.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
basically,
many years ago.
And George wanted to get a tertiary course, and it was Richard Bell who said, typical big-noting Richard, said, we want a degree course of our own. He just went straight to the top.
Yeah.
Everyone went, okay, let's go there then. But it was as simple as that. But there was momentum, and Jennifer's, as you said, was the right person for the long-term commitment.
And the thing is, it didn't need a committee or a set of interviews or any of that sort of nonsense.
We did have an interview.
No one can remember it.
I hope not.
Yeah, and Laurie.
Yes.
Yeah. Laurie and Marshall Bell.
Laurie,
Yeah.
most
Marshall
definitely.
And Marshall, yeah.
Both Marshall and Richard, they were, the main gang, and I didn't have those people behind me. I don't think I would have thrown my hands up and walked out, but it was great to have them there and know that I had people that I could depend on.
But I think academically too, I remember Colin Kriss. You know, there were people who did sort of midnight hours too, because whilst Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal input were creating the idea for this course, it had to be written in an academic format to get through the university system. So it had to be translated. So at the same time as ideas were, like artists' ideas were coming up, it had to be distilled back down to something that could be translated into a format that the academy could understand. And, you know, we all had, you know, George, and I just think that there was this lovely moment in Brisbane's time, and it says a lot about Brisbane and our collaborative history, the way that we do. And lots of cultures came together for that.
And it probably, in my opinion, it comes together because of particular people, not because of organisations and institutions. I mean, they can help if they're good institutions. But if they lose the capacity to be self-critical and they're in the arts, they should close their doors.
We had the best director in Ian Howard at the time too. He was a director that never said no to me. So I loved him. Yeah.
But moving on, in terms of your own art practice, you've talked to me about the fact you're looking to return to painting as well.
Yeah. I mean, I did that Irvine Bank Massacre painting for my master's degree. Yeah. And that just made me just love wanting to paint again. So I think I'm going to move more that way. I'm going to do that. So even though I didn't end up doing fine art, I did a master's degree in visual arts. So I came around. I got into fashion to do fine art, but I never ended up doing it until I was some way through the course myself, and I thought, oh, gee, you know, you can't really, you've got to show people, you can't teach them if you can't do the stuff yourself. So then I started painting, and I started to produce some work over the years. And I'm sort of thinking that painting might be my next move. More painting. Yeah.
The painting is not in Irvine Bank Massacre, which I was hoping we would have slides
It should be
of.
coming soon.
But for those of you who might be new, I don't think there'd be many of you in this audience who'd be very new to Jennifer's work, but there's not a big jump between what you're doing with the fabric and the paint. You know, because you get that
So you
imprint.
use fabric in the paint.
It's that forensic thing, and it's locating of the process in the final product that gives the work a very, you know, tangible, and they've got hit to them because of that process that's trapped in the final image. The shroud-like nature of those bundled things in the bottom of Irvine Bank.
Yeah.
So,
And it was talking about hidden histories too, you know, massacres that went unrecorded, unnoticed, you know, invisible histories almost.
well, it certainly worked in that one. I'd like to see more. Now,
Here
Slider's
we go.
doing bugger all. There it is, the shrouds.
So this is 9 panels, and each panel is a metre square.
No questions from the audience? And that's another one, Jen, it's got the red background, that Warriors piece that you did a while ago now.
Yeah.
This is more recent, using printed matter and also going back to your ideas of text from like land rights posters.
Yeah, so I actually did the painting of the Irvine Bank Massacre about 5 times before I was satisfied with it. So I'm a bit of a pain in, wanting perfection, I suppose, and realising that you never really get perfection.
And this work, Mother's Country, you want to redo as well, don't you,
Yes.
on a larger scale? And
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
the windows for the UQ.
Where are they now? Making me giddy.
So more recently, some recent imagery extending the shields, the targets and camouflage. So how are you thinking about?
Yeah, well, that was also talking about invisible history too, in some ways, and sort of saying, Aboriginal people are still targets, and the war is ongoing. It hasn't disappeared. They haven't stopped killing Aboriginal people. So it was really the cause that was the start of the passion to do the work, I guess. And I haven't really stopped.
Not at all. And there's been plenty of things that have stood in your way.
Yep, raising children. No, they really didn't get in my way. I was doing fashion when they were little anyway. But I think I had Genevieve when I did my teaching at QUT, and I used to take her along in a baby pouch and go to lectures. And then when I did fashion, we used to do parades with the kids. I was working with Spinner Kriss at the time, and we used to do little shows with the kids all dressed up in the designs that we'd made.
So Jen, in terms of keeping a practice going as an artist, you go through so many changes from when you start. What are the fundamental things you think you need to keep yourself making? Passion.
Yeah. And a bit of skill helps. Yeah, no, I sorry. Passion and just that idea of trying to do stuff that's important. It's important to me to tell the stories that I don't think have been told. And that's why I became so interested in shields, because I always thought of them as the first line of defence. I remember someone at a meeting one day saying, what are shields got to do with defence? I said, well, they were the first line of defence. What do you mean? What does it have to do with propaganda? Well, same story.
This might be a good time to talk about your conversations, influences and camaraderie that you have and shared with the ProppaNOW artists over the years. Have you got some reflections on those sorts of group conversations which have fueled your individual works? And
Yeah, I did a range of things. I suppose when I started working with ProppaNOW, we used to have our own little exhibitions in our studios over there at West End, and you know, I started doing these little statues that I made of straw and tissue paper, and then I'd have a pinhole drawing mountains or something behind it.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I did, I think, an installation down in Canberra a while back. I think it was called Push.
Adelaide.
Vernon.
Adelaide.
Was it Adelaide?
Push.
Butch.
Push. 2010?
I thought we did it in Canberra as well.
Probably.
They're no help, are they?
Vernon is not our fact checker.
Well, he used to be.
2010 Push Adelaide Visual Arts Festival.
Yeah, I know we went down there and we possibly presented that work there, but
The bamboo boat?
no, that was Woodford. And so I remember Pat rescuing the boats when they went loose.
It flooded.
We had a flood,
The entire...
and I had these beautiful bamboo canoes with, you know, faces of black fellas or pictures of black fellas, and covered with tulle, I think.
Yeah. Like
And-
burial canoes.
And then they were lit, and they were in the river that
Yeah,
went
in the
little
creek.
and then they had a flood, and they all started floating down the river. And Pat went and rescued them.
I got them out too. It
Just,
was carnage.
Quick question. Have people responded to the app to send questions to the teleprompter? Just a bit of a survey here.
There you go.
Did you check in when you came? Sorry.
That's a good question. Which other... The question's coming in from Anonymous saying, which other Indigenous artist inspires you? Any particular artwork in particular?
Vernon Archie, Tony Albert.
Who else is in
Just
the
go
room?
along
Jen,
the
quick.
No, it's not just choosing people in the room.
I'm kidding.
No, I'm
No.
not. I've always liked and admired Vernon's work, and Tony as well. Richard, a little. He's not here. I can say anything.
But that has to be the title of a big painting
And what,
in big letters. Richard.
in the 50s it
little?
was Little Richard, and now it's Richard a Little. Is that right?
Yeah, I kind of liked his paintings in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Really, I did.
Yeah, and the collage and stuff.
Yeah.
With all the kids and all that early stuff was great.
And then, a lot of big bold statements that sometimes I could see the point, and sometimes I couldn't.
So Jen, there's someone else asking, what kind of routine have you got when you're painting? It says, thanks so much first, but what kind of, when you create art, what kind of routine do you have?
Well, I think sewing taught me to be a little bit
Organised.
organised. Yes, I put it clear that because I used to sew on the dining room table, I used to have to clear the table every night for dinner. So, and the same thing, I'm still doing work on the dining room table.
Yeah.
And
Nothing wrong with that.
unless it gets bigger, and then I move in some, what do they call them, those trestle tables, until they're wide enough to, so I get as many of them as I can and put stuff underneath them so that the paper doesn't get crushed. And yeah, so I just try and be a little bit organised, otherwise it gets away from me. And
you sometimes involve family with the making.
Yeah, I do. Of course I do. They've got better eyesight than me. Especially the pinholes, you know. They're kind of... I can do the mid-section, but I stay away from the lines now. Because I've just been diagnosed with macular degeneration, but apparently it's the slow kind. So, you know, I mean, if I step away, I might do what... who was that famous artist who lost his eyesight?
I don't know.
Come on, people. You must know.
Who lost their son? Oh, well, I mean, Lloyd Rees was nearly blind too,
yes.
And he got better and better. And
he started painting abstract.
Well, they were almost, yeah, but I mean, you know, like Renoir, he went blind too.
Yeah.
Well, blind. There is a corker of a question. It's not the first question, but I have to ask it. I don't know who sent this, right? The question is, who is your favourite child?
That one's got no likes. But there's one with 2 likes saying Queensland Indigenous artists are so strongly represented on the national stage. Why do you think this is? And how important has the national context been to you?
You're going to have to repeat that after I
answer
the other question.
You'll have to talk to the 3 likes.
It says Queensland Indigenous artists are so strongly represented on the national stage. Let me tell you this. That, in the Tate Modern, right at this moment, there's a big show on that they did with the MCA. I counted, I think, 5 artists from Queensland. Would that be right? In the lineup. So that is a huge... How many were there all together in that lineup? Maybe 12 all up. So that is one hell of a percentage of Queensland representation. So why is this so strong? Why do you think this has happened, that there is such a strong representation of Queensland Indigenous artists, and how important is that context, has the national context been to you?
Well, a lot of those artists were Aboriginal too, weren't they?
Yeah, they are. They're artists,
Tracy
Aboriginal.
Moss.
Yeah, Tracy, Gordon Bennett.
Richard.
Richard.
Hey?
Those 5 are.
Yeah. Repeat the last part.
So
how important is the national context, or even the international context, to you, having your work shown? And I should say that more recently, the Irvine Bank 9-panel work was a few months ago purchased by the Australian War Memorial. So that is, you know, a definitive national context. But what's the importance of the national context to you, Jennifer?
Doesn't mean much to me. I don't really look around. I mean, I admire the works of Vernon Arkey, Tony Albert, Richard Bell a little, but I don't look to other artists for ideas. Oh, Gordon Hooky, yeah. I mean, I brought that fella up to Queensland because I liked him so much. And it was in the, the gathering shows that the Premier of Queensland put on. And he paid huge money to do those shows. And I chose a painting of Gordon Hooky's that was very controversial, and the police commissioner got involved with it and had police going around asking the audience if they were offended by this painting that Gordon Hooky had done. And I didn't have a problem with it. But, you know, I probably think a bit differently to other people. And then I think the police commissioner rang Peter Beattie, who was the Premier at the time, and he said, you know, the show's not going to be closed down, and we're not going to take that painting off the wall. We hired some professional people to do that show, and what has the police commissioner got to do with Aboriginal art or any art for that matter? So, yeah, that was a huge success, but we had the director at the time coming down to inspect what was on the wall because it was a bit of a full-on painting, but it was something that portrayed police and it had piggy hooves along the top of the canvas, referencing the police, and then I think they had...
You can't cancel Gordy.
No, the Prime Minister at the time.
Was it Goss? Or
It was Peter Beattie. It was Beattie.
No, the Prime Minister.
Oh, the Prime Minister.
Oh,
The one, Howard it was, because I did a lot of work. That's when I started doing a lot of work at college.
because of those...
Yeah.
We've got time for one more question, Pat.
Oh, I can't pick. There's one at the top. What's the favourite piece that you've ever made?
Probably the Irvine Bank Massacre.
Well, there you go. Well, you answered that so quickly, I'm going to ask the second question.
Yep.
Could you tell us more on what country means for you and your practice?
Oh, I think it's the very idea of country, but I was hoping to retire and kind of move to North Queensland so I could, you know, trace the steps of my mob a bit, you know. And over time I've gathered quite a bit of information, but I haven't stayed up there long enough. I've done a lot of research and a lot of talking to people, but I haven't. I think you've got to be in country for a while to... I mean, I've been up to North Queensland and swum in the rivers that, all the creeks that Vernon used to swim in as a child. I remember I think we were up there for the kick arts thing, weren't we? Wasn't it up at that time? And I remember doing a portrait of Jen, a photographic portrait, and she said, as long as it's within the gallery, I don't mind. I don't want to see it on anything in public, like...
This is your youngest daughter
Yeah.
for the rest of the audience.
And they decided to put it all over the building. And I had to ring her up and say, your photograph is on the building.
With her in boxing gloves.
Yeah, with her in boxing gloves and... Yeah.
Well, Jen, it's come a time to wrap this up. I would just like, on behalf of the library and everyone here... No, not yet. I would like to thank James and Marika Sourris again. I know you've been acknowledged. What you do and your interest across film, visual arts, through the library, your interest in recording history in an artist-led initiative. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm sure everyone... And the team at the State Library, it's terrific, and I'm sure you've learned. It was nice to have this candid thoughts of Jennifer. She is real, and it's very refreshing and always engaging. Thank you, Pat, your interview. You can view the whole interview online. That little 6-minute edit was a taster, so you can hear more and see more. And once again, it comes down to the Sourris library idea, which is terrific. And on that note, I think, is it a wrap? It's a wrap.